October 1933, Brussels. This is a photograph of the most important physicists alive at the time, packed into a single room. Marie Curie is in it. Ernest Rutherford, Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg standing in the back. And seated near the front, a woman almost no one watching this has ever heard of, even though every single person in that room knew exactly who she was. 5 years after this picture was taken, she fled the country she'd worked in for 30 years, carrying almost nothing, 10 marks in her purse. And a few months after that, her name was quietly left off the biggest discovery in modern physics. Not because she died, because one decision at a time, people wrote her out. Today, we're putting her back in the picture. Her name was Lise Meitner. She was born in Vienna in 1878 into a secular Jewish family at a time when public universities in Austria didn't admit women at all. So she studied privately, sat the exams anyway, and in 1905 became only the second woman in that university's history to earn a doctorate in physics. Then she moved to Berlin, no job, no real prospects, and over the next 3 decades, became one of the most respected physicists in Europe. Einstein called her our Marie Curie. In 1926, she became the first woman in Germany to hold a full professorship in physics. I want to be honest about why this one got under my skin. It isn't that she was forgotten. Plenty of people get forgotten. It's that she was standing at the exact center of the discovery that shaped the 20th century. The physics behind nuclear power and behind the bomb. And you almost certainly learned about that discovery in school without ever once hearing her name. When I started digging into how that happened, I kept waiting to find the villain. Some sealed order, some single moment where a person decided to erase her. I never found one, and that's the part I still can't shake. To understand how you erase someone that important, you have to start with how hard she fought just to be allowed in the room. When Meitner arrived in Berlin in 1907, the chemist who ran the institute where she wanted to work, Emil Fischer, did not permit women in his laboratories. So they reached a compromise that tells you everything about the era. She could work, but only in a converted carpenter's workshop in the basement, with its own separate entrance. She wasn't allowed upstairs where the men were. For the first years, she wasn't paid at all. She lived on an allowance from her parents, and out of that basement, she and a chemist named Otto Hahn began one of the great scientific partnerships of the century. It lasted 30 years. In 1918, together, they identified a new element, protactinium. By 1922, she'd earned the right to lecture at the University of Berlin. When a newspaper announced her inaugural talk on cosmic physics, an editor assumed he'd misread it and printed it as cosmetic physics instead. A woman lecturing on physics simply didn't compute. Keep that small detail in mind. It matters more than it looks. By the early 1930s, Lise Meitner had become exactly what that basement compromise said she never could. She ran her own physics section. She was being nominated for Nobel Prizes. She sat in that photograph in Brussels as an equal among the most famous scientists on Earth. And then, in 1933, the removals began. Not of her, not yet. In April, the new Nazi government passed a law barring Jews from academic posts. In September, Meitner's license to teach at the University of Berlin was quietly revoked. She was Jewish by birth, and that was all the law needed. But here's the strange part. She kept her research position. Her institute, the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, wasn't technically a state body, so the law didn't reach her there. And she still held an Austrian passport, which meant that for the moment, she was a foreign national. The German state couldn't simply throw out. So she stayed, she kept working. A month after losing her teaching license, she traveled to Brussels and sat for the photograph we opened with, surrounded by legends at the peak of her field. already half erased from one institution and not yet aware of what was coming. That protection held for almost 5 years. And then, on a single morning in March 1938, it stopped existing. In March 1938, Germany annexed Austria. Overnight, Austria stopped existing as an independent country. And Meitner's Austrian passport, the thing that had shielded her for 5 years, became worthless. In the eyes of the Reich, she was now a German Jew, with no way out. An exit visa was nearly impossible to get. Staying was becoming lethal. A colleague inside her own institute had already denounced her to the authorities. What happened next reads like a thriller, except every piece of it is documented. A Dutch physicist named Dirk Koster traveled into Germany to get her out. On the 13th of July, 1938, they crossed into the Netherlands by train, with Koster convincing the German border guards that she had permission to travel. She didn't. She left the country she'd lived and worked in for 31 years, with one small suitcase and 10 marks in her purse. Otto Hahn, her partner of 3 decades, had given her a diamond ring the night before. It had belonged to his mother. If the guards stopped her, she was to use it as a bribe. She never had to, but she carried it across the border. She ended up in Stockholm at an institute run by a physicist named Mana Siegbahn. And this is where the story quietly turns. Because the man who should have been her rescue gave her almost nothing. No real team, no proper equipment, a desk, and not much beyond it. She had escaped with her life and lost her laboratory. That winter, a letter arrived from Berlin. Hahn and his assistant Fritz Strassmann had kept running the uranium experiments she had designed. And they'd gotten a result that made no sense. When they fired neutrons at uranium, they kept finding barium, an element barely half the size of uranium. By everything physics understood in 1938, that was impossible. Nuclei didn't shatter. They chipped away slowly, one tiny particle at a time. You could not turn uranium into barium, and yet, chemically, that's precisely what Hahn was seeing. In the letter, he all but begged her, "You're the physicist. Tell me what's happening. Suggest some fantastic explanation." Meitner was spending Christmas in a small Swedish town called Kungälv. Her nephew, the physicist Otto Frisch, came to visit and found her still turning that letter over. And on a walk through the snow, Frisch on skis, Meitner on foot beside him, they worked it out. They sat down on a fallen tree trunk, and she did the arithmetic on a scrap of paper. The nucleus wasn't chipping, it was splitting, pulling apart into two, the way a droplet of water stretches and divides. And when she calculated the energy that split would release, it matched Einstein's equation exactly. A sliver of mass converting into an enormous burst of energy. She was the first person on Earth to understand what was actually happening inside that uranium. And it was Frisch, working beside her, who gave it the name we still use, nuclear fission. And here's what still gets me about that scene. 2 people on a log in the snow, working out the math that would define a century. It sounds like something a screenwriter invented, except it isn't. Hahn's letter survives. So does Meitner's own account of that walk. Every detail I just gave you, they wrote down themselves. Now, the paper Hahn published a few weeks later did not carry her name. And here, I want to slow down and be fair, because this is the part almost everyone gets wrong. When Hahn published that first paper announcing the barium result in January 1939, Nazi Germany was 2 years from war. Putting the name of a Jewish refugee, someone who had just fled the country illegally, on a German scientific paper would have been dangerous for everyone, possibly for Meitner most of all. That first omission, I think, you can genuinely defend. But that's where the defensible part ends, because weeks later, in February, Meitner and Frisch published their own paper. the one that explained the physics, the one that gave fission its name. The record was right there, anyone could read it. And still, the story that spread across the world was clean and simple. Otto Hahn discovered nuclear fission. As the years passed, Hahn didn't correct that story. He sharpened it. He began describing the discovery as a purely chemical achievement, something that needed no physics at all and therefore needed no Meitner. And here's where it gets almost hard to sit with. In 1943, Meitner was invited to join the Allied effort to build an atomic bomb at Los Alamos. She refused, flatly. "I will have nothing to do with a bomb," she said. Possibly the only major physicist of her generation who was asked and said no. Then, after Hiroshima, the American press went hunting for a story and crowned her the Jewish mother of the atomic bomb. Sit with the shape of that for a second. She was pushed out of the discovery she actually made and then handed ownership of the one thing she had looked at and walked away from. So who erased Lise Meitner? The easy answer, the one you'll hear most often, is the Nazis. And it isn't wrong, exactly. The Nazis did drive her out of Germany, strip her of her home and her lab, and make her a refugee at 59. But the erasure of her name from the discovery itself, that didn't happen in Nazi Germany. It happened in neutral Sweden, and it kept happening after the war ended. After the Nazis had lost, after there was no regime left to blame. In November 1945, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for 1944 was announced. It went to Otto Hahn alone for the discovery of fission. The discovery Meitner had explained. At that moment, Hahn was being held by the Allies at a country house in England called Farm Hall. He found out he'd won a Nobel Prize from a newspaper when the Nobel Committee's own archives were finally unsealed in the 1990s. Historians went through them, and what they found wasn't a grand conspiracy. In a way, it was worse. It was a committee out of its depth, chemists judging work that was half physics, unable or unwilling to grasp a discovery that lived between two fields. And it was the scientific establishment around her, the same one that had handed the refugee a desk and little else, quietly deciding she didn't quite count. I can't tell you what was in any of their heads. I can only tell you what the files say. Across her life, Lise Meitner was nominated for the Nobel Prize 48 times. She never won it. This is the part that actually kept me up. When I started, I was hunting for the moment of erasure. The decision. The person who did it. What I finally understood is that there wasn't one. Nobody burned her papers. Nobody held a secret meeting to write her out. What happened to Lise Meitner was quieter than that. And that's exactly why it worked. A government expelled her for reasons that had nothing to do with her science. A partner she trusted spent the following years slowly retelling the story with himself at the center, and her name thinning out of it. A prize committee, out of its depth, took the simplest path in front of it. And then, the textbooks. Thousands of them, in dozens of languages, copied the version already sitting there, finished and convenient, and taught it to you and me. Not one of those people had to be a villain. Each just had a small, ordinary reason to leave her out or to look the other way. And that, to me, is far more frightening than any conspiracy. A conspiracy you can expose. But how do you fight a thing that needs no plan? Just a lot of people, each quietly deciding it isn't their job to say her name. I spent weeks inside the published letters and the Nobel Archive research for this. The correspondence is real. You can read it yourself. And if you know someone who was taught that Otto Hahn discovered nuclear fission, send them this, because that's how a name comes back. The same way it left, one person at a time, only in the other direction. In 1997, almost 60 years after that walk in the snow, a newly created element, number 109 on the periodic table, was officially named Meitnerium. It's one of the very few elements ever named after a woman. She'd been dead for nearly 30 years by then. She's buried in a small village in England. Her nephew, Otto Frisch, the one who was there on the log in the snow when they first understood, chose the words on her headstone. They read, "A physicist who never lost her humanity." So in the end, she was put back. Her name sits on the wall of every chemistry classroom now. Whether the students notice it or not, but I keep circling back to how long it took, almost 60 years. And it only happened because someone finally walked into an archive, opened a sealed file, and read what had been written down all along, which is the thing I can't quite let go of. The documents that put Lise Meitner back sat closed for 50 years before anyone looked. So I find myself staring at that photograph from 1933, all those faces, all those names we do remember, and thinking about the ones we don't. The people just outside the frame, the files nobody has opened yet. How many of them are still waiting?